Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex Gee, a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. Gee.
Black Like Me.
Hey, great people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex Gee. I've put together a new series. I'm calling it Our Madison. And I'm looking at the things that have shaped our city and our city's history, particularly through the view of African American people. So I'm talking to trailblazers, history makers, folks who I consider my elders who were born in Madison, but also young people who are young enough to be my children who are born in Madison, who are giving us their perspective of this city as well. It'll be about 4 episodes that'll come out over the next few weeks. And listen, if you're from Madison, this is going to be a great journey for you. But if you're not from Madison, you're from a city that has had first also. So I want you to listen to both my love for my city, my passion for my city, my desire for my city to be equitable for all. So when I push on an issue, if I care enough to push on an issue, it's typically because I'm passionate about it. So I want you to listen to it and learn about my city, learn what black elders and black youngsters and young adults are saying about life in Madison. It's a beautiful place, great campus. It's the seat of state, county, and city government. But yet there's some invisible things that are impacting African Americans that are making us develop diseases, contract diseases, and die more quickly than our white counterparts. And so I just want you to hear through the stories of some great people in our community what has motivated them and what has made them sad. Then I want you to think about your own communities, because these folks live where you live also. Get to know them. Ask them their stories. Help to honor them and their contributions. And also ask them the hard questions. Is this the city you'd want your grandchildren to grow up in? So I just want you to just listen and learn. And I'm just certain that you're going to enjoy these next several episodes. Let me know what you think. I've got some wonderful young ladies who are in the studio today, and they are all from Madison, born and raised in Madison. Their parents have lived in Madison for years. One guest, dad has moved out of Madison, but real interesting show. We're talking about growing up black in Madison, Wisconsin, but really I'm going to be talking to these young ladies about their experiences as young African-American women. So I have as guest today in my studio, my daughter, Lexi Gee. Hello, Lexi.
Hello.
All right. I call her Ms. Catherine. And my niece, Alexandra. How are you doing today?
Hey, good people.
All right. And then special guest, a special friend, Malaika Robinson. Malaika, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Listen, so I'm glad that all of you are here in the studio, but I always do something that's called Black Icebreakers. And so I want to talk about a few of those things before we get into the show. Is that all right? Is that okay with you, Lexi?
That's all right with me.
All right, I'm going to start with Malaika because, Lexi, I know this answer. Malaika, grits or cream of wheat? I know you went to a white high school.
I did.
So where'd you go to high school?
Luther Prep in Watertown.
So I think you moved there from Madison, right?
I did, yep.
So like you lived in the dorms. That's like college prep. How many black students were in your freshman class?
You can count them, 10 fingers.
Really?
Oh, in my class, though?
In your class?
Or the whole school?
How many in your class?
In my class, 2.
Including
me.
Oh, so do you know all the black students?
I did.
I hope so.
Like so like when you see your friend on campus, that's a black student union meeting, right?
Yep.
And if y'all just look at each other and just say la da doo doo, that's like the gospel choir.
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if y'all mean mug somebody, that's being ghetto or gang. And could you sit together in classes? Because that would be like reverse segregation.
I mean, I don't think we actually had many classes.
Well, they wouldn't let y'all because
no.
Okay, was it a female or a male?
It was a male.
Okay, so then they didn't call you him. All right, because they might have just said, "Hey, are you Tanya?" Malaika. Gotcha. Yeah. So Malaika. So growing up, grits or cream of wheat?
Grits.
Okay. Okay. All right. Did you put butter and sugar or butter and salt?
Butter and sugar or cheese.
Cheese also.
Yeah, or cheese grits, but not cheese and sugar. That's
so it'd be
wrong.
one way or the other. So you either have cheese in them. Okay. Who made the grits in your house? Your mother or your father?
Both of them.
Both. Who made better grits? Your mom or your dad?
Ooh, See, the thing is, they gonna listen to me.
Who put
Now
the
it's
cheese
like-
in them? Your dad?
No, my grandma did.
Your grandma did.
My
Okay,
grandma
but I like
did.
the sugar in it. Yeah, you need to talk to your girl, Lexi. Holler at your girl, Lexi. Okay.
eat both.
No, I know you do them both. I know you do them both. Let me see. Let me see if something else I want to ask you. Okay, I'm doing something a little different with you all young African American women. I'm going to ask you Black parental icebreakers.
Oh, no.
I'm going to ask you questions about your parents.
Don't
Come
do
on. That's right. All right. So let me ask you this: have any of your parents ever said to you, "I will give you something to cry about"?
No, never.
Never.
What is
never?
threatening you?
Never.
No, come on. I know, Lexi. Come on. Neither of your parents have ever said, "Let me give you something to cry." Like when you
I know.
crying. Yours did. Allie, did your mom?
Without a doubt.
She did.
you
Lexi,
know.
I'm sure.
who said it? Your mom or your dad?
Definitely you.
Wow. Did it work? I know. I hated when my mom said it because, I mean, you get ready to get this spanking. What are you supposed to do? Say, "Bring it, mama"? I tried to break it down with Tia. She, I'll give you something to cry about. All right, so y'all all heard that. That probably came from your grandparents. Have you ever yelled, "I hate you, get out of my room," or "I wish you were dead"? To either of your parents? Malaika, have you ever said that to either of your parents?
I wouldn't be here right
Right.
now.
I know.
We'd be dead.
You be dead. I wish you were dead. Dearly beloved, we ain't gathered here. Alexandra had lived a wonderful young life. Lexi, how about you? Have you ever said to your parents, get out of my room"?
I value my life too much.
I hate you.
Right.
No,
Oh,
never.
no.
Absolutely not.
Have either of your parents ever said to you, "You ain't grown," or "You ain't that grown," since you have been grown?
Probably.
Since I've been grown, yeah.
Since you've been 18? Like, have you ever said something or stood up for yourself? Like, wait a minute, you ain't. You
Yeah,
ain't
since
grown.
18, definitely.
Yeah, since 18. mhm.
Have they said it since 21?
My grandma has.
Has she really?
Definitely.
Your grandmother has?
Definitely.
That's well, we were having lunch last week with a friend, and the friend's mom is a young man. He's what, 22, 23. His grandma said, "You're not grown yet. I'm grown, but you're not really grown." I mean,
Well.
he moved like 1,000 miles from home. He has a college degree. He got his own place. He's got his own job. He's a professional. She said, "You ain't grown yet."
Yeah.
Is
can
that what
see
we
it.
do to you all? Lexi looking at it like, don't be looking surprised like you ain't ever said it. Wow. Okay. All right. Let me just see you. Have either of your parents, whether they meant it or not, have they ever threatened you, I'm sure at an appropriate moment, with any type of bodily harm that would result to your waking up in the middle of next week at some point?
Yes.
Really? How does she say it? How does he or she say it? Like, quote them on it. She's going to listen, but, go ahead and say it. She knows she said. How does she say it?
Like, I'm going to slap you the next week. Or like I slap you to a different race.
To a different race?
She would.
That's old school. Okay, your mom
Yeah.
got that from old school. I'll slap the black off you.
Yeah, she says that.
Wow. Allie, have you ever been said that your mother?
Definitely slapped the black off of me.
Really?
Did you see that
My
episode
behind-
of Everybody Hates Chris? He literally got the black slapped off.
They did. That's so funny because, our white listeners are thinking, do parents really say that? Yes. Yeah, kind of. I mean, can you? No, it doesn't. And if you're
No.
wondering, it doesn't come off. It doesn't come off. Now, my engineer Eli is giving up his mic because we have 3 guests in the studio. But with just a thumbs up or thumbs down, Eli, have either your mother or father ever threatened to slap the white off of you?
No, that's never happened.
That's never. I would recommend not doing it. When I was going to school, you wouldn't go to jail for it. Today, you'd go to jail if you slapped the black off of some people.
Some people.
Okay, let me ask you this. Have any of the clothing styles that were popular for your parents come back around in your lifetime?
I think so.
Yeah.
Really? Like what?
Trying to think of an example. Like high-waisted shorts.
Okay.
Yeah.
True.
Okay. All right. Platforms, are those back in your generation?
Actually, yeah.
I think
Platforms
so,
are
yeah.
actually,
Oh,
that is
yeah.
a big trend now, actually, now that you mention it.
Natural. What about natural hair?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's we've been talking about that.
Yeah.
That's a major thing.
That's a
back
major
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Malak, you've been wearing your hair natural for how many years?
About 2 years.
About 2 years. And so that's a big thing in the early 70s. In fact, we would call them naturals. Like I just, and so then they morphed into afros. People referred to them as afros. But when I was a kid, it'd be like, I want to get a natural. I want to get a natural. And sort of when naturals morphed into afros, Afro-Americans sort of morphed into African-American. Oh, okay. This is this. Yeah, okay. Y'all gonna leave. Anything else? Bell bottoms? Are bell bottoms back?
Not yet.
Not
I'm sure they'll be back.
I feel
soon.
like people will wear them if they're going like for a vintage style.
Right.
But I don't think they're like coming back full force.
How about
yet.
music? Is there music that you listen to? Your parents come in, they start. Is this how your parents say it? Hey, that's my like y'all might just I like that song, but you can kind of like if you're playing something that your parents like, do they just like start snapping their fingers, twisting their mouth, and like dancing real slow? Say, hey, we used to dance to this. Oh my, really? Have they done that?
Oh yeah.
Have any of your parents ever embarrassed you like while you listen to music? Hey, you were born to that music. Oh, and your parents ever saying that embarrassing stuff to you?
I can see it happening. I don't think it happened.
Oh, that was our jam. We played that. Oh, got you.
Please no. I'm begging you not to do this to me.
Let's stop. Have your parents ever embarrassed you by coming up to your school and doing something embarrassing?
Why are you looking me directly
No,
in my eyes
not
as
my
you ask that
parents.
question?
Really? That's right. Okay, that's right. Of course not. Next question.
Oh yeah, no wait.
Next question. All right, so you all were each born in. You all are crazy. You all were born in Madison, Wisconsin. Were you all what hospital?
St. Mary's.
Allie?
St. Mary's.
Malaika?
Meritor.
All right, so these are major hospitals in Madison. And just so you all will know, I mentioned earlier, Lexi is my child. Alexandra is my niece. She is the oldest child of my sister. But I admitted Malaika's mother into the University of Wisconsin. I was an admissions counselor when she applied. So I knew her application. And her dad is actually my fraternity brother. So her dad pledged me in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Oh, 6. And so I've known your parents for a long time. Your mom's been involved in the community through music, through your mother's an actress, through acting. Your dad through community service, through our fraternity, has served the community. Alexandria, your dad lives in Seattle, but when he was here, was very active in the community. Your mom still is. She's leading Defending Black Girlhood, and a number of things as a social worker, an educator, and Lexi, both of your parents are. So you all are very unique in that you are all born in Madison. I've known each of your parents for either as teenagers or in their entire lives, and so your perspective on Madison politics, educational systems, I think are particularly important. I'm wanting to talk about Madison in a way that allows people who live in Madison, who lead Madison, who are political leaders, influencers, to listen and hear a perspective of people they don't normally hear from. Those are African American women who were born and raised in Madison, except for the 4 years Malaika went to the Lutheran school out in, where's again, what's the city?
Watertown, Wisconsin.
In Watertown, Wisconsin. Got you. So we're going to talk a little bit about those experiences, all right? Okay, while growing up, think about this for a moment. What's the largest number of black students you've ever had in one of your classes prior to high school?
Including us?
Mm-hmm.
I think 4 for me.
Mm-hmm. Allie, what number?
I think 4.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4.
Okay.
Elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
In elementary school,
Yeah.
how many African American teachers have you had here in Madison? In elementary?
0.
0.
Yeah, I think 0.
Makes you want to think about it, but
Yeah.
Right.
I have like a vague memory of like maybe an assistant teacher or something.
Sure, but I was actually thinking about just your
But like
major.
main teachers, yeah, no, none.
Sure. And again, just so you all can, I want you to be real relaxed. This is not about bashing Madison because we love Madison. But part of it is if people don't hear through our perspectives, they only hear about Madison through their children's perspectives, or just people who might be in trouble. They don't understand folks who get up and go to work. Allie, you and Malaika work in the educational world. Teachers, educational assistant, helping children really do well. Lexi, you're a librarian, a library assistant. You're studying grad school because you're wanting to be a youth librarian. And so people rarely hear your perspectives on Madison. So I'm really, really pleased with this. What did you not learn about yourself or your culture in school that you wish you had learned growing up? And this is in any particular order. I mean, anyone could, not in any particular order, anyone can jump in. What did you not learn about yourself or the contributions of African American people of African descent that you really wish you had learned growing up in school?
Everything.
Really?
It feels like really everything almost. Because the times when we did learn about ourselves in history class would be like a week. And it would be just like about slavery and all of the hardships. We didn't even learn anything positive about what we contributed to this country.
Sure.
It always seemed to stop, like either at slavery or at Martin Luther King Jr. Like that's all we did was like to the 60s, and that didn't stop.
We were slaves and then we marched.
Right, and that's it.
Then everything
and cut.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Lexi, I came and gave a lecture once to your history class, or African American
experience.
African American experience.
Yeah.
And what was the demographic of the teacher who led that?
She was white.
So it was about African American experiences. So here's what's really interesting about our school district. If you don't have a teaching license, you can't be the main teacher. So I could come in and lecture in the class, but you have a woman who has not been African American, does not know the experience. And she was a really good, I appreciate her. She was a good educator.
She was.
And she thought about how to bring people in. But you have this class that African Americans gravitate towards. Then it's a white teacher who's talking about the African American experience. Again, she was connected to the community and invited me and others to come in. But how long had that course been taught at West High School by white teachers, and they didn't know any black people in the community to come in? So she asked you to ask me.
Yeah.
She said, Lexi, we have your dad come in. But if I hadn't written Justified Anger or had been known in the community, I probably would not have been asked in. What was that like? Again, this is nothing about her teaching, but what's it like being in a class having the African American experience? Of course, you're graded on, taught by a white woman. Was she apologetic? Did the students take it seriously? What was that? What was that setup like, Lexi? I know that's a ways back.
Yeah. I think that class was really different in a lot of ways because that was the only class I ever took that was predominantly black. Ever. Mm-hmm. So I think that made it a really different experience in and of itself. But a lot of those students really respected that teacher because she really gave us a lot of freedom in the classroom, I think. He was much more hands-on than other classes I took. But it definitely was... I don't think I had the language to explain why it was strange to have Black history explained by a white person because it was all I'd ever known. Mm-hmm. I'd never experienced anything different. But it's definitely uncomfortable, I think.
Sure. Now, each of you have gone through our Nehemiah and Justified Anger U.S. Black History course. Mm-hmm. Juxtapose that experience with that teacher, again, who really did her best, with the course being taught by Professor Christy Clark Pujara, an African-American woman, a scholar, tenured professor, talking about the Black experience. How did you feel about the information you learned and heard being taught by a Black woman?
It feels much less distant. I think when it's a white person teaching Black history, it requires some sort of distance, some sort of separation within yourself because it's really traumatizing history.
Yes, it is.
And I think learning it from a white person doesn't make it any less traumatizing. But I think when you see a Black person teaching it who is validly angry about what happened, she talked a lot about the slave trade in particular. Mm-hmm. So she was validly very angry about what she was talking about. And so I think it made me feel validated in also feeling angry, which I feel like I never really let myself feel when I was in a either predominantly white or a context that was led by a white person.
Oh, that's good insight. And then she also talked about her love for the Constitution.
Yeah.
But just because she's angry at slavery didn't mean that she was non-patriotic or anti-American. Right. Mm-hmm. She just said, because I love the Constitution of this country, I want to hold it to a high standard. How about the two of you, Alexandra or Malaika? Anything that you remember? I mean, that had to be a unique experience. I mean, here's a black female college professor. Did you have any professors that were African American women?
No, we almost did, but it didn't work out.
Whoa.
I won't go into all the details,
No,
but
she
we
won't.
almost
She said
did.
Minnesota,
Right.
hell no.
I did not. If y'all listening in
She said, I'm not gonna be that black woman in Little House on the Prairie. Remember Little House on the Prairie? There was just one black woman. But Allie, you went through the class. Any thoughts about that?
I love what Lexi said, because having her as a black woman for, well, both of those layers, black and a woman, it makes you lean in as opposed to having that distance of having a white teacher speak on these things. And also just letting you embrace those emotions about how you feel about what happened, and knowing that it's okay to feel how you feel, but to also embrace your love for the country too.
Sure.
Which I think she has a good demonstration of upholding both of those.
She definitely does. I remember one thing she said to the class is, don't let the history books fool you. Slavery did not destroy black people, because destroyed people don't create culture. Look at our music. Look at our art. Look at our food. We could take the lower parts of a pig and turn it into a delicacy. We could slow roast something until, all the bad in it is gone, and then put some sauce on it and make your toes curl up. She talked about the music and just how we survived in that spot. So tell me about, was that taught in your African American history class, the resistance, Lexi, even to the point of slaves resisting slavery and working to fight against the South and free themselves? Was that something that you all learned or knew about African American history?
No.
I think that there's such a layer of shame whenever we would talk about, have that week or two to talk about black history. It's like everyone's looking at you to give insight. It's like we all have that experience of knowing that, oh, here we go again. It's that time of year.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to be looking to you for insight. And it's just like that layer of shame. So having to navigate through that.
Do you think that there's a different, I'm just jumping around to some questions I have for you all. Is there a different layer of complexity of being black and female in Madison growing up than it is for black and male?
Definitely.
Can you talk to me about that?
I mean, I think that brings up the concept of intersectionality, right? That's two places where lived experience, two marginalized lived experiences meet. So I think being black and female has a really particular, it's very different, I think.
Than being black and male?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
The innate sexualization of black women's bodies, I think, is a really good example. Because that's something that, I mean, I guess black men are still sexualized as well, but it's very different.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think that that's unique in Madison, or different in Madison, or different because of African Americans being such a small portion of the population here in Madison?
I mean, I think I meant that more generally, but if I think about in Madison in particular, I think it can be very isolating in a way.
But you're saying just in America, it's different being black and female than it is being black and male. So when people say the black experience, there's a difference when you probably get into generation, but certainly between male, female,
I think among any
group,
any marginalized group, I think that there is a shift in lived experience.
Okay. And this is not always the case, but when I was in high school, many years ago, almost 40 years ago, many of the African American men played sports, and so that gave you a chance to interact with each other, but also our white counterparts. And particularly since some of the fall sports like football would meet before school started, at the beginning of the year there'd be a group of friends who were established. As you were growing up, did African American women play in sports or have that same opportunities? I should say opportunities. That's not what was that different for black women? Were there many black women who were student athletes when you were in school? Because that's a place, again, where as men we could at least connect and meet other folks. Did that happen as readily, do you think, for black female students?
No, it seems almost like it's isolating in a way.
Really? Tell me more.
Well, I mean, for me, having 2 years at Edgewood and being at a predominantly white Catholic school, I mean, I'm speaking from that experience because when I went to West, I didn't play sports. I couldn't play there. So, but yeah, being at Edgewood, there was like 4 black people in the whole school, so just in itself you're already isolated. So then that layer of playing sports, which not everyone did, so out of the 4
Right.
it's almost like you want to pursue this thing, but you're going to be more isolated by doing that.
Sure,
in a way.
sure. Lexi, I remember there was an orientation, open house or something for the girls track team, and there were 70 young ladies who showed up, and 3 or 4 of them
Yeah.
were black
Yeah.
Wow.
out of
That's
70.
surprising,
That is surprising.
especially for West.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because when I was
West is-
growing up, a lot of the black girls would play sports, and again, that's where they would build cross-cultural relationships.
Right.
So I think that does make some of the experiences, a little bit different. So I want to shift and ask a question. Madison is known for its racial disparities among black and white students, but I know you and your parents, and they're professionals, and they've traveled, and they've given back to the community. We don't often hear about the struggle that students have, whose struggles are something other than academic. It could be perception that maybe you have special needs because you're African American. So I'm just curious, do you feel like you've interacted with teachers or educators who have assumed because of what you look like, that maybe you're not college bound, maybe you're struggling to get out of high school, or maybe your parents are struggling? Do you feel like you've been typecast just because you're black, that you are an at-risk person, and that maybe teachers didn't see you or challenge you or pull out the best in you? That was a long question, but
Yeah.
now your situation might be a little different, Malaika,
Yeah.
not because you're at a private school, a
Yeah.
residential school, so there probably was an academic test that you take to get in. So there
Actually, well, for Luther Prep, yeah, there was.
There was, okay,
not
for
for my elementary school.
right, but for
Yeah.
Luther Prep. But I'm just curious, did you ever feel like you were interacting with teachers who were talking to you or interacting with you as if maybe you shouldn't have been in that level of a class, or maybe you didn't have aspirations, or maybe they mixed you up with somebody else who was really struggling? Did you run into anything like that? Either of you?
I don't think I ever ran into that, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind that it could be a possibility. Like, that was one of the drives to, that was one of the things that drove me to do well academically, if that makes sense.
Sure. So that you wouldn't be mistaken for what?
Like, not intelligent because of, what I look like or my race or anything like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that puts extra pressure on you because you are intelligent, but the pressure to prove it because there might be the perception that you're not is an extra pressure. I mean, every student wants to come across as smart in college, but because they want to get into medical, dental, law schools, etc. But just to overcome a perception that might be out there that because of how you look, you might not be as intelligent. It's just one of those extra pressures that they've got to bear. I mean, Lexi, we talked a little bit about your application process to the University of Wisconsin, and your guidance counselor actually discouraged you from applying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, she's, without looking at my records or anything, she was like, oh, you shouldn't apply. You probably wouldn't get in.
Now, as a guidance counselor, you want students to apply as many places as possible. And so you got in and you were given, what was your scholarship called?
Power Snap Scholarship.
And so that paid for your tuition for all 4 years. And then your grad school is paid for. And here's a woman telling you not to do this and didn't look at your grades, because when you wanted to go to a smaller state school, she then looked at your records and she said, wow, what did she say when she saw then she looked at your grades and what?
And then she was like, you should also apply here.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Vanderbilt. I mean, she's trying to get you to apply. No.
Yeah.
What's the one in St. Louis? Wash U.
Yeah.
And so here's a case, like, as a guidance counselor, what would make you think that this student could not get into Wisconsin, other than maybe many of your other students did not apply to Wisconsin, but you still look at your grades? Because between looking at Wisconsin and the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and you're asking her for a letter of recommendation, the only difference was that she looked at your grades when you were applying to Whitewater after she said you wouldn't get in to Wisconsin. You were admitted and then offered a full academic ride for 4 years. And so this is something that I think is really important for the Black Like Me family who are listening in to really understand that these are real things. These aren't things that we just make up. If your child is struggling to stay in school, if I were up at the school because my daughter was cussing the teachers out or fighting, you know that's happening because they would call you and let you know. But when you have a child and we send you to school and your parents have worked hard to get you to where you are and they've gone to college, we're thinking you all are good. We're not thinking that teachers aren't looking at your grades. We're not thinking that teachers are thinking less than. We have not set you up for those kinds of barriers. And that hurts my heart a bit to think that when we dropped you off in front of those schools, you all had to navigate that kind of space too. What about with other students? Because we're just talking about teachers, like wanting to navigate that space with teachers. But what about students? Have you felt like you needed, I mean, Malaika explained something that's really interesting, but she was out of town at a private residential high school. Allie, you mentioned being at a predominantly white Catholic high school for 2 years. Lexi, you were at West High Public School, but still predominantly white. On a daily basis, were there times you felt like you had to defend the race or be sharper or having to overcome some perceived stigma about your race and or gender in school? Was that a reality? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just kind of curious about what that was like.
I mean, yeah, I feel like in some ways I felt like I couldn't win. Like, I felt like I was always working really hard to be like above and beyond or whatever. But I do remember like when I got the Power Snap scholarship and I was like really excitedly telling a friend on the track team and she was like, "Oh, you're so lucky you're black."
Oh.
Wow.
What?
So
I'm sorry, wait, hold on, wait.
Lexi, did you snatch that heifer when she said that?
I should have.
Please.
I should have.
Lexi.
Ooh.
Because believe me, she would not choose to be black for 1 minute. I mean, now that grant is set up, but because of history.
Right.
Because of history, because
So
of people
you
being
want to go
admitted.
through all that to
You wanna
get to
go-
that?
Exactly.
So you're
You
lucky
want-
though?
You're lucky though. It's not your grades. It's not that you're in the
What?
national honors. But she said it must be. So the perception is, when you do become a professional, a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, it's in the back of some people's mind. Did they get into college on affirmative action? Do I want a black lawyer? Do I want a black teacher? Do I want a black doctor? Do I want a black surgeon? Because if they were an affirmative action student or higher, I don't want them cutting on my daughter's brain.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And I feel like even
That's real.
Yeah.
People think, not everyone, but people do think that and have said things like that. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this segment of Black Like Me. I want to take this moment to tell you about something new that we're adding to the Black Like Me experience. I've added a Patreon page. Yeah, that's right. Patreon.com/BlackLikeMe. It allows me to really connect with the listeners more. As I've been traveling the last few months, I am meeting so many strangers who are telling me how this show is having an impact not only on their personal perspectives and lives, but their professional lives. And that means a lot to me. So we've created a number of tiers, and I think you'll like this. Cream of wheat, grits with salt level, grits with sugar, grits with shrimp and cheese, a black icebreaker level. We've been able to offer a great show to you for the past 2 years, and we want to maintain that level of professionalism while adding a few new things that I can't quite tell you yet. But please go to patreon.com/BlackLikeMe and help us take this show to another level. Let me shift a little bit to something else I wanted to ask you all. What do you want elected officials or business leaders or educational leaders here in Madison to know about young African Americans like yourselves? What do you want them to know about you? Your needs, your wants, struggles, because this is within some of their power. You know, they're business leaders, educational leaders, political leaders. What do you want them to know about life for African Americans in this community? If they're serious about keeping young women, young professional women like you in this city, what do they need to know? You could just rattle off stuff.
That they need to bring us in to these conversations, that you can't assume, that you need to ask us and have us in those spaces to converse with you and to even help create these new policies and different things.
Right.
That you can't assume.
Sure.
But we're right here waiting.
Sure.
We have some of the answers too.
Sure. Many times when we talk about African Americans in Madison, there's assumption that this growth in numbers come from the outside. And I'm sure we have influx. No one's from Madison. People have come here for school or work and end up staying. You all are unique. You were born into this community. Right. There's probably an assumption you're from Chicago or Milwaukee or down south someplace. What else do you want political, educational, business leaders to know about you and your world, your needs and perspectives, if they're serious about keeping? Because there's a talk about a black brain drain, that young women like each of you will move to Atlanta, Dallas, someplace in the South, because you just don't want to deal with space like Madison. So what do those elected officials need to know from you all? Because they're going to listen to this podcast.
hire us and people that look like us.
Yeah.
Like on your teams, on whatever you're working on, there needs to be, if you want to keep people that look like us here, hire people that look like us.
Right.
And not just as cooks or
No,
folks
on
who
your
carry your
teams.
bags
On your
Right.
teams.
or sweep the streets,
Right.
On your teams.
wash your dishes.
Say one more time. On your team.
On your
team.
Ma.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I got you. So, okay.
And not just one.
Oh, talk to me some more.
Ooh, yes.
Oh, you struck a nerve.
Yeah.
Miss Catherine, talk a little bit more about that. What does that do when you hire just one?
It makes you feel tokenized. Like you cannot hire one person of color and then expect them to be like the black voice on
Right.
on your team. Like
Right.
no, like
Sure.
every black person has a different lived experience, so they can bring different context. Hire multiple people of color.
Right.
Definitely.
Right.
And put
please.
and put them in positions of leadership.
Yes.
Help them to lead.
Yeah.
Got you. Got you.
Yeah.
Because people do want to grow and want to stay in Madison. There's this thought that maybe black people don't want to because it's too cold or the winters are too long, and none of that's good. But that's an easy out.
Yeah.
The issues are probably larger than that. So Lexi, in the library, as a librarian, a future librarian, you're a librarian assistant. So you're saying, hire people into teams. And so you don't want to be tokenized. You don't want anyone coming to you saying, Lexi, African American history is coming up in 3 months. Will you set up the African American history exhibits? Will you order the black books? And if you're just asked to handle that stuff, you're saying that's not something you want to do or become.
I mean, the thing about that is I probably would have done that anyway. But if you're going to ask me to do that, then I'm just going to get mad.
Right.
And it's like, that's not asking a lot. Like that seems like a very reasonable request, is to be like, hey, if you really want black people to stay, hire black people, and especially in contexts where people are working with kids, especially in places where there will be kids of color, like the school system or like libraries even. Like that's a place where black kids or kids of color in general would be given the opportunity to see people that look like them doing things that they might have otherwise gone their whole lives without seeing people of color doing. Like I know I went pretty much my whole life without seeing any black librarians, which is like a huge chunk of why I want to do what I'm doing.
Ladies, talk to me a little bit about how life would have been different for you if you had seen more black principals like Miss Angie Hicks or other African American teachers. Because Lexi, how many black teachers did you have at UW?
At UW? 3?
Maybe 3. And they were probably graduate students?
I got lucky because I took a lot of creative writing classes that were taught by like fellowship students or like graduate students.
Got you. So they're professors in the making. And so how would life for you have been different in Madison if more... Let me ask you this. Have any of you been seen by a black physician? Alexandra, you had a black physician, but you were a baby. You wouldn't remember that.
Yeah.
But did you, as a pediatrician, did you have any black... Did you have either of you have black dentists?
Nope.
How about when you went to get your eyes checked?
Nope.
This is scary. No.
Are your beauticians black?
Mine isn't.
Mine is, yep.
When you go to stores, I'm just trying. Are you used to seeing like black managers of department stores or restaurants when you go in? That's hard to know.
Definitely not growing up. I think more so now. It's changing, but not growing up.
Yeah.
And so, with Madison's black population growing, what's the danger of not having more people in leadership? Because now Madison can't say we don't have people. And not only are the folks who are here, they have relatives that are living all around the country, so they've got a connection here. So talk to me about the necessity of really doing what you said, Lexi, hiring black people, Allie, promoting black people. What will Madison miss? What will happen to Madison if during this time of increased African American presence, if we ignore our beautiful presence and don't see to it that we are in key position? Now, and the reason we're saying see to it is that we know we got people that are qualified. So if you're out there listening, well, we want the best candidates. We're talking about brilliant. We're talking about cross-cultural. We're talking about people who can talk to our generation and yours, our culture and yours. So don't even think that. So if you're thinking that, stop. We're assuming when we say bring black people to the table, we are talking about qualified black people. Because we know that if we don't bring qualified black people, we will all be grouped. So don't even play. We're talking about folks who have the degrees and experience. Malaika, you're a black school teacher. Don't tell me that MMSD can't snatch you out of that parochial system if they really want to hire you and increase that salary and do all of this other kind of stuff. Don't tell me that Madison has a plethora of black librarians that they should let Milwaukee or Detroit steal you. Don't let me, don't act like we don't have people in the Verona School District or in other places doing what you're doing, Allie, with children. They're here. They're born here. They know Madison. They know snow. You know how to wipe your car off. You know how to rock that car until you get out of that snow. You have You have jumper cables in your car. Y'all know how to handle Madison. But still, Madison will say, Alice, we can't find them. We don't know. I still have people. I was just on a podcast and the man said, I don't know where to go to meet black people. What do y'all say to people who say, I don't know where to go to meet black people?
Walk down the street. Like we are here.
Walk down a different street.
Yeah, go down another street because we exist.
We're
Open your eyes. Look us in the eyes. Open them. Or maybe look at a black person when you're walking next to them across the street or something, or engage.
Right.
Yeah.
We're right there because we see you all the time, which means you have to see us.
Right. So y'all are here.
So if I see you every day, you see me too.
Because I think people have said that to me because they want me to bring black people to them because they don't want to go to where black people are.
Yeah.
Cop out question.
Right.
All right, I got you. That's a real cop out question.
I think too, to your question, is that it's deeper than being jobless. It also affects us physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Tell me more about that.
Because there's even been a study when they look at like microaggressions and how that affects the mind and how that can bring forth mental illness. And it's just deeper than not having a job. This is affecting us mentally, bringing forth depression, isolation, anxiety, all these different things.
And are those real things that people experience?
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to compare what I'm about to ask you with young African American women who have grown up in Detroit or Atlanta because there might be different levels of pressure. But do you think being born and raised in Madison as an African American female is enough to warrant generalized anxiety?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Like how? Why? Because I want people to really hear this because when we talk about these things, we're not just saying, ugh, white people, they've got cooties. That's not what we're talking about. You're talking about representation. You're talking about comfort. You're talking about hospitality. You're talking about fitting in. Those things are really, really important because when that's established, you can be more hospitable to your non-black friends. But when you don't feel like you're at home, you can't help others to feel at home. So talk to me about how growing up in a place with the expectations that are out there, with the racial disparities, with the isolation, with the lack of representation, with limited teachers and social workers and folks who look like you. Talk to me about the impact that has on emotional health.
I mean, I can think back to elementary school, and I loved the school that I went to and my friends and stuff, but I remember not feeling like my blackness was enough. And that led to being in like that mindset of isolation and just questioning your own value.
Yeah.
So I remember just being in elementary school and just already like having anxiety as a kid. And it's like, that's crazy thinking back, but it's like that and being directly linked
to school.
That.
Right.
Really?
I had like something similar. So my elementary school was predominantly white. So then my parents, to combat that, sent me to the Boys and Girls Club on the South Side so I could have more black friends. And I was 8 years old, and I got there, and all the black kids said, "Why do you talk so white?" And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. Like that was, it's hard to navigate those two spaces of like trying to be white enough to appease the white people so they're not scared of you, and trying to be black enough, but like, what does that mean?
But that's stress weird in itself. Like, so tell me what that stress felt like, because like you can say that, and people could say, "Oh yeah, I remember friends saying that." But what does that feel like when you've been in that white space all day, and then this happens in the black space? It
just felt, I don't know, really weird because at the time I didn't like know what it meant. So then I changed like the way I talked and stuff. But then like I would bring that to the white space and they'd be like, "Oh, that's so ghetto." And I'm like, "Wait, hold up." It's like, it's hard to.
It's like, literally code switching.
Code switching.
Code switching.
Yeah. And so I always have to like change it, It was just weird. And especially at home too, like I didn't hear a difference. Like my parents talked, I guess
the way they talk.
Yeah, the way they talk. Yeah, whatever. Maybe they talk more like with more like AAV, vernacular here, but you know, my mom said she put on her white voice sometimes on
Sure.
like professional phone
That's
calls
code
and everything.
switching.
Yeah,
Yeah.
code switching. So I didn't know the difference at all until, and at 8 years old to have that happen to you is just kind of jarring.
And so what I'm hearing from this, young ladies, is this is the stress that you feel when you're reading above your grade level. Your math is above your grade level. You already know, your parents already know when you're 8, you're going to college. They don't know who's college, but they know you're going. So again, these are not the struggles of people who can't get out of high school, who didn't get out of high school. This is a struggle at 8 years old at somebody's future teacher. So you're having that kind of struggle that's adding pressure
Yeah.
to you at that early age, when you've overcome the other issues of not sofa surfing or being hungry when you come to school or being physically accosted by your parents. So you come to school, you know, you're all jittery and stuff. You come ready to learn. And then because you're black in this predominantly white space, you've got to have this extra little thing after school to like remind you of your blackness, as if you don't know you're black.
Right.
Other folks from from the dominant culture don't have to do that. They don't have to go any place to be reminded of their whiteness.
Yeah, it I feel like if you picture a pie chart, it's like a very big chunk of that is like an identity crisis, where it's like other 8-year-olds are like talking about horses and dragons, and there's like this large part of your brain that's like, how do I act? Like, how do I function? What do these people expect me to be doing?
Right.
Did you ever feel that kind of pressure? Because Allie talked about feeling that anxiety is in elementary school. Malaika talked about it. Did you feel that, Lexi?
Yeah, I think it's I felt like I didn't know how I was supposed to be acting because I felt extremely aware of being black all the time.
At your elementary school.
Yeah. But I didn't know, like, it was like I didn't know what to do with that. Which is similar to what you were saying, Malaika, but I think it's just like, for lack of better wording, it's like another flavor of like identity crisis.
Sure. Did any of your white friends tell you that you're not like other black people?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Or like, oh, Malaika, you don't act very black. Or like, I'm blacker than you. I listen to this. I'm like, oh, I'm so
getting
annoyed.
Mad now. White people tell you that they're blacker.
Right. And I'm like, are you though?
Are you really?
Okay, are you though?
Wow, because
Yeah.
it's not just the collagen lips or the hips or the nose. It's the premature death because of stress. It's all of the other stuff. Being black is not just who you listen to on the radio. How about you, Lexi? Were you ever told?
Yeah, definitely. I also would get a lot of like white kids coming home after vacation being like, I'm darker than you.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that too, Ellen?
Yeah, that
Are you sure about
specifically.
that?
Right.
Is that really what you want? Because there's some extra pressure with
Right.
Right.
So I think it took me a really long time to make my blackness mine because I felt like white people set like a type of like, this is what being black means. And I was like, okay, but I don't necessarily act that way, or I don't necessarily do that.
And you don't get to tell me that.
Right. And so, but it took me a really long time to understand that.
Sure.
So I felt like as a kid, I was like constantly chasing this thing that A, wasn't attainable, and B, wasn't even what I wanted, but I didn't know enough to know that at 8 years old.
And while you were all experiencing these things, you're being told, because this is Madison, that we're liberal and we're accepting and you fit in here while all of this is happening. So how young of an age were you at when you noticed race? Because of course when you're at home and your parents and family are black, it's not something you got to think about. Do you remember when you first realized it? Like, you know, the movie Corinna, somebody said, "Do you taste like chocolate?" You know, they have these, and kids have these. You know, kids. What's really interesting is Allie and Lexi, when you were babies, I watched like you all going to any kind of business establishment where they had play areas for kids. Malaika, you and Lexi did play dates as young kids. Kids would just play in the sand together. I'm about to re-ask my whole question, so humor me. They'll play in the sandbox and stuff together. when did race become an issue for young kids? Because I watched you play with strange white kids. Not strange white, but kids who were strangers. No, I mean kids who you didn't know who were strangers to you. What happens that people begin to say, "Oh," and then we see color and value is assigned to that indifference and worth. Do you remember when that happened?
I don't know about me personally, but I do know when I was student teaching, I student taught in a predominantly white early childhood center.
What age?
3 to 5.
Year-olds or grade?
Preschool. So 3 to 5 year olds.
Okay.
Yep.
What would you notice?
They asked me why I was brown a lot, which I thought was interesting because I didn't think they would notice or care.
Right.
But they did. They said, "Why are you brown?" I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you."
And there was nothing bad associated with that. They just wanted to know.
They were just curious, like, "Why is your skin brown?" And I was like, "Oh, this is how I'm made." But I never thought that would be an issue.
Sure, and they didn't treat it like one, but they were intrigued.
No, yeah. They were
and Lexi, didn't you say you got a friend's daughter who asked?
Yeah, I was like watching her kid for a little bit, and she's white. She's 3 years old. And she came over to me and like touched my arm and was like, "What color is this?" And I was like, "It's brown." But yeah, it's interesting.
She said that's pretty.
Yeah, she said it's so pretty.
So how do we go? Kids being just curious to assigning some innate value to that.
Yeah.
That you need to talk a certain way or walk a certain way or you listen to certain kind of music because you have that color skin. And I mean that might be a hard question because you're in your early 20s. You may not remember when that happened, but at some point that curiosity changed into something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably early, like
I would
first
say,
grade. The
I
second
would
we
say
could really
early
talk
school
and have
age.
that deeper consciousness of what's happening and of what's around us.
Yeah,
But
early school age, I think.
Yeah.
Sure. You all made some great points about what we need to do to keep Black people here. We don't want them to fall into the sunken place. We want to keep them. Want to keep them here. Let me ask you just another question. I want you all to think about this for a moment. You can pause for just a minute. And Lexi, your dad's sitting here, but I want you to pretend like he's not.
Oh.
So close your eyes, young ladies, so Lexi, you don't see that your dad is sitting here. Do you regret having been raised in Madison, Wisconsin? And again, I just want your honest answer, so I'm not trying to feed a response. Any way you want to answer it.
You know, some days I do, mostly because, so the school that I went to, I was sent there because it's a Christian school, so my parents wanted me to, be raised in that. And my dad, his Christian school was like all Black. So
he grew up in Milwaukee.
Yeah, he grew up in Milwaukee.
Completely
and it was like
different experience.
So that's one thing I do kind of regret about living in Madison is that my dad got that.
He got to be in a Lutheran
school that
educational system, but also be around African Americans.
Right. Yeah. So he got that.
Gotcha.
Both of those things. So I kind of do. I wish I had that, but growing up in Madison, where I grew up was a good place to live.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's some good parts, but you wish you would have had that cultural experience.
Yeah.
Young ladies, how about you all?
I agree with Malaika. I don't think that it's necessarily a regret. There's a lot of good things that you can extract from this experience, but it's also that longing. Like I know if I grew up in a more predominantly Black city, I could have embraced my Blackness at a young age. I could have maybe avoided some pieces of anxiety and different things that were stemmed to that isolation. And maybe there's that longing for what it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But I also recognize that I learned so much through the experiences of being raised here and knowing how to navigate and operate with all types of people with confidence.
With confidence.
And that's something that a lot of people don't have. So it's like,
right.
It depends. Yeah, it just depends how you're looking at it, your perspective.
Sure. Because your dad's from Detroit. And when he came here for school, it had been just a Black world. Teachers, nurses, postal workers, bank tellers, so Madison was hard to navigate because it was so different from someone coming from, say, a D.C. or Detroit. But you're saying having been raised here, you've grown up with the children of judges and police officers and professors.
Right.
Being in predominantly white space or intelligent space or strategic space or educational space doesn't make you want to run and be afraid. You know how to navigate that space with confidence. That's important.
Yeah, it really is, because you can see that within whatever path you end up taking, there's there's a lot in which that helps you.
Sure. Lexi, how about you?
I think I would largely agree with what Allie just said. I think there are some, I think that's a hard thing to answer because there are some things about Madison that I really do genuinely love and that I feel like have shaped me very well. But I also think that there have been parts of growing up here that have been really traumatizing. Which I think. So I think that's hard. It's hard for me to really answer that because, like Allie said, I feel like I know so much about how to navigate predominantly white spaces or even predominantly non-black spaces really comfortably.
What does that cost you to be able to navigate white spaces? Because people listening just think you like push a button and like, okay, now I'm going to protect myself in white space. I'm going to navigate, but what's the cost of that at the end of the day? Like, what's the cost of navigating white space well?
It's exhausting.
That's the first word that came to mind.
Tell me more. How? Not that you have to educate folks, but people are listening because they really want to know, because they've got black friends. They've got friends who've adopted black children. They're not ready for this. They just think if I give them just a good white environment and do this and do that, not put too much hair oil in their hair. And if I do these kinds of things, they're going to have a very balanced life. But no one has talked to those folks that even when the children have capability and potential and educational acumen, it's still exhausting. Why?
I think when you're functioning in a space that is largely white, it just doesn't feel... I never feel like the most authentic version of myself. Which is something I can prepare... Wow. Like, I feel like I can prepare myself for that. But you're acting, so you get tired.
Wow. So you're always in character.
Yeah.
Now, Allie, you're an actor who's been trained. Do you feel tired when you perform? Like, we just went to one of your comedy shows. What did that feel like? Because I want to tie that back. You know where I'm going.
Right.
But you get to step out of that role, whether it's taking your costume off or your makeup off or coming from under the lights. Right. But when you're performing, is it tiring?
I feel invigorated. I feel like one of the best versions of myself. So it's interesting to say, like, to compare the two of performing in one way that it drains you and exhausts you, and then in another way. Because you want to act. So you want to be, and in acting, you try out for a part. I want to be this mother. I want to be a daughter. It's not like someone just throws a role at you. In acting, you get to at least audition for the kind of role. Right. So doing that part of your work is invigorating. But at the end of it are you tired after being on stage and having lived in this other skin or this other role? Yeah, especially if you are tapping into those real places of who you are to connect with that character. It is very draining. Sure,
and it's a character you want to play, but like Lexi's saying, if you don't want to play this role, you don't want to be the happy black young lady who's in this reality, that can be really draining.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. We have a new mayor who's a woman, and it's the second female mayor in Madison history, and she's going to listen. She's listened to Black Like Me. What message do you want to offer her? And I mean this in a very positive and very respectful manner. What message of intersectionality or concerning intersectionality do you want her and people in her cabinet to understand about African American people who she wants to keep and promote here in Madison? What does she need to know? I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but what would you want to say to someone who's probably in tuned to this young population? You have a platform. What would you want your mayor to know about what needs to happen in this city to make young, beautiful women like you want to stay here?
I would say, for one, go deep and not be afraid to go into places that may be uncomfortable because you're not used to being in those spaces, but to know that there's so much value in meeting us where we are.
So coming to the community,
Yeah.
having a forum with you.
Coming to the community, maybe having an event or space that we can have a conversation that we can come to, invite us in.
So
and don't be afraid to
talk
invite
to
us
young
in.
black women
Yeah.
to find out
Yeah.
what you're thinking. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. What do you think, Lex?
Yeah, to go off that, I think giving us a space to talk is really good, but also making space to listen, which I feel like those go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
But they also cannot sometimes. So
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah.
So you would say to her, really listen. Like, you don't have to appease us or prove you're down with us,
Right.
but create space where you can really hear
Yeah.
what's going on. Because we talked about this before, Lexi. Sometimes you feel in that space, people either want to make things so much better that they really don't listen. So again, let's just underscore the listening parts.
Yeah.
To really listen. Anything else?
I mean, I think also don't be afraid to humble yourself and to really look at areas where you may have done wrong, or maybe your prejudice or ideas have influenced the way that you've navigated in this city.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah, just that acknowledgement and being okay with that.
Yeah, I think people always would rather see active work towards growth than trying to pretend like you never did anything wrong.
I think that's where we get stuck in Madison. You all just touched upon something really huge. As African American people, we don't need Madison to prove to us how anti-racist it
Right.
is.
Exactly.
Acknowledge where it has fallen
Right.
short, and then let's turn it around.
And where you as
Exactly.
an individual too.
Sure. So you would say, so search your heart. Mayor,
Right.
governor, newly elected folks, school board members, search your own heart. Don't work in proving that you're above this. We swim in this cesspool of racism. How could you swim in it and not be infected with it and affected by it?
Right.
So what I'm hearing from you, Madison-born African-American women, professionals, is search your hearts and then be a part of the change in your systems. Is that what you're saying? To use that power to really bring about change?
Yeah.
And how would you want her to interact, say, with businesses and things like, okay, so she looks at her heart, but she gets to influence others. Not just her now, let's just make it more broadly. When you do have power, and being a mayor is power, being a teacher is power, being a business leader is power, how do you then bring that power to bear upon systems?
I think part of it is being that example, because as the mayor, people are looking up to you. So if you're searching your heart and if you're bringing black people in and having these conversations, these honest conversations, I think you'll start to affect the people around you.
Sure.
Being in that position.
Being that example.
So, yeah, being that example.
That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
Do you see yourselves growing old in Madison?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
That's not his answer.
Right.
I think it would depend on a lot of things.
And I think a lot of that depends upon the change that we're waiting on and that we also want to be a part of too.
Sure.
I feel like it's hard to commit to a yes
Yeah.
without knowing what the future holds in the city and basing it upon what we see right now.
That's a great answer. That's a great response. Listen, young ladies, I appreciate you, Alexandra, you, Malaika, you, Lexi, being on the show today, because this is tiring, but you're also a part of history. You're part of this series that I'm bundling together that talks about the Madison perspective, because I want people to know that we're very diverse. And so I've talked to older Madison-born blacks who are in their 80s, and then you all, and then folks who weren't born in Madison, like Alexandra, your mom, Malaika, your parents, or Lexi, my wife, your mom. But we're here, and we can make this a great community for everyone. But my desire for this discussion is to open people's eyes to realize it's within our grasp to make this the best community that it can be. When African American people or other people who have been disenfranchised offer suggestions or criticism of a community or suggestions of how it can be better, people double down, get upset, will then leave, go back to Chicago. We're really trying to make it the best community that it can be. So young ladies, please know that I really appreciate this discussion, your insight, your perception, and I think Madison is darn lucky that you all were born here and you have chosen to live and work here. So thank you all for being on the show today. I hope that it was enjoyable to you because I enjoyed your brilliant insights.
Thanks for having us on.
All right, thank you. This has been another great episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex Gee. And as always, folks, subscribe, listen, enjoy, learn, share. Thank you for being part of the Black Like Me family. I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Ooh, black like me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex Gee's amazing work at www.alexgee.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.